In an isolated monastery, a nun feels that something is hidden in the shadows. When a storm puts her life at risk, a mysterious horse seems to be the only answer. But what does it hide? Salvation or a secret that should never be revealed? Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, like and subscribe so we can continue creating stories like this. At St. Mary's Monastery of Peace, nestled among the imposing mountains of the Blue Ridge in Virginia, Sister Catherine found in faith the strength to face her days of perpetual silence. At 32, she no longer remembered the sound of her own voice or the songs of the birds that flew over the convent every morning. Deafness had arrived with the accident that had confined her to a wheelchair 7 years ago. But instead of questioning, she cultivated gratitude for the life that still pulsed in her chest. The monastery, a century-old colonial construction with thick stone walls and spacious gardens, housed 27 nuns under the firm guidance of Mother Angela. The place was known in the region for its work with equine therapy, offering free treatments for children with special needs from nearby villages. At the back of the convent, a spacious stable housed 5 horses, each with a distinct personality. "Sister Catherine has a special gift with animals," commented Sister Lucy, as she observed from the kitchen window the wheelchair-bound nun approaching. Onyx, the majestic black horse that curiously only allowed himself to be touched by her. "It's not a gift, it's an obsession," retorted Sister Marianne, who had never hidden her discomfort with the special attention that Mother Angela gave to Sister Catherine. "She spends more time with that horse than in prayer." Mother Angela, who was entering the kitchen at that moment, interrupted the conversation with a simple hand gesture, making the 2 nuns fall silent immediately. Sister Catherine's connection with Onyx is mysterious, but it was he who helped her continue when she arrived here completely desolate. Let them continue that way. Outside, under the blue sky of that autumn morning, Catherine moved her wheelchair along the stone path toward the stable. Her brown eyes, always alert, observed every detail of the nature around her. Although she could not hear, she felt the vibrations of the world, the gentle tremor of the ground when the horses moved restlessly, the subtle changes in the breeze that announced storms, the way the light danced differently when someone approached. When she reached Onyx, the imposing black horse brought his muzzle to Catherine's outstretched hand in a gesture that was repeated daily. To any observer, it seemed just a docile animal recognizing its handler. But for Catherine, that moment was sacred. She felt that Onyx understood her silence in a way that no human had ever managed. What no one in the convent knew was that, at night, Catherine often dreamed that she rode freely through the mountains, without a wheelchair, without limitations. And in each of these dreams, it was Onyx who carried her, as if the bond between them transcended physical reality and reached a plane that went beyond mundane understanding. It was on a Wednesday afternoon that Sister Lucy found Catherine bent over an old wooden chest in the convent's attic, her hands handling yellowed papers. "What are you doing here?" Lucy gestured, using the sign language she had learned to communicate with Catherine. "Looking for answers," Catherine replied with skilled hands. "I feel there's something about Onyx that needs to be discovered." Lucy shook her head, concerned. Catherine had always been obstinate, but in recent months this characteristic had intensified. It was as if she were being guided by some invisible force. That same day, while leafing through an old diary found in the chest, Catherine came across a sepia photograph. Her heart raced as she recognized the location. It was the convent's courtyard, but the image dated from 1924, almost 100 years earlier. What made her turn pale, however, was the figure at the center of the photo. A young nun in a rudimentary wheelchair, next to a black horse identical to Onyx. Turning the photo with trembling hands, Catherine read the faded inscription, "Sister Clara and Shadow, 1924. Something inexplicable made her keep the photograph in the pocket of her habit instead of sharing the discovery. The sky darkened suddenly that afternoon. Heavy rain-laden clouds advanced over the convent, bringing with them a portent that none of the sisters could ignore. Mother Angela ordered everyone to check windows and doors as the news warned of a severe storm approaching the region. Catherine was watching from her room window when a flash illuminated the stables, followed by the tremor that she recognized as a terrified whinny from Onyx. Without thinking twice, she took her raincoat and headed outside. "Catherine, no!" shouted Sister Marianne from the corridor, momentarily forgetting that the other could not hear her. The rain was pouring torrentially when Catherine reached the stable door. Through the heavy drops, she saw that part of the roof had collapsed after a lightning strike, and the horses were agitated. Onyx especially seemed beside himself, rearing up and beating against the door of his stall. With effort, Catherine managed to open the main gate and maneuver her chair over the muddy ground. That's when she felt the earth trembling beneath the wheels. It wasn't the movement of the horses causing that vibration. It was something bigger, more terrifying. The ground around the convent, situated on the mountainside, began to give way under the weight of the incessant rain. Catherine watched, horrified, as a crack opened in the stable floor, rapidly advancing toward her. The crack in the stable floor widened with each second, swallowing earth and stones, transforming what was once a safe place into a dangerous abyss. Catherine tried to turn her chair to return to the convent, but one of the wheels got stuck in a loose board. She gestured frantically, hoping someone would see her from the monastery window. The sky, torn by lightning, intermittently illuminated the desperate scene. In the convent, Sister Lucy ran through the corridors seeking help, while Mother Angela organized the other nuns for a rescue operation. "We cannot wait," shouted the mother, donning her raincoat with precise movements. "Marianne, Joanna, come with me. The rest prepare towels, hot water, and the first aid kit." The mud from the hillside was beginning to slide toward the stable when the three women left the convent. The strong wind almost knocked them down, but they pressed forward, calling for Catherine. A short distance away, they could see the nun struggling to free her chair while trying to calm the frightened horses. "We're coming," shouted Mother Angela, even knowing that Catherine would not hear her. It was at that moment that the ground beneath Catherine's chair gave way completely. The nuns watched, terrified, as she was dragged along with part of the stable to the edge of the precipice that was forming on the side of the mountain. In a matter of seconds, the chair and its occupant disappeared into the darkness of the abyss, carried away by the earth that continued to crumble. "Catherine!" Sister Lucy's desperate cry echoed uselessly against the storm. What happened next left the three women paralyzed. Onyx, who until then had been contained in his stall, broke down the door with a powerful kick. The majestic black horse whinnied in a way that none of them had ever heard. It was almost a human lament. Before they could react, he bolted toward the exact location where Catherine had disappeared. "No," tried Mother Angela, extending her arm as if she could stop him. But it was too late. Onyx, with an impossible leap for any ordinary animal, launched himself into the abyss in the same direction as Catherine. The silence that followed was more frightening than any sound. The nuns remained there in the rain, looking into the void, unable to process what had just happened. It was Sister Marianne who finally spoke, with a trembling voice. "We need to get help. The firefighters. Someone." "There's no time," replied Mother Angela, her face pale against the dark sky. "No one will get here with this storm. And by then—" She didn't complete the sentence, but they all understood the gravity of the situation. They returned to the convent, soaked and in shock. The other sisters, seeing their devastated faces, understood that something terrible had happened. Some began to pray, others cried silently. The monastery, always so full of peace and order, was now immersed in despair and confusion. The night advanced slowly, each minute seeming like an eternity. The storm showed no signs of passing any time soon. Inside the convent, in the small chapel, the nuns kept a vigil, lighting candles and praying incessantly for the soul of Sister Catherine, and curiously also for Onyx, who had demonstrated a loyalty beyond understanding. It was Sister Lucy who, around 3 in the morning, decided to check the landslide area again. The rain had diminished to a fine drizzle, and the moon occasionally appeared between the dispersing clouds. "Where are you going?" asked Sister Joanna, seeing Lucy take a flashlight. "I can't just sit here," she replied, her voice choked. I need to at least check. Joanna nodded, understanding, and decided to accompany her. The two nuns walked carefully over the soaked terrain until they reached the edge of what remained of the stable. The landslide had created a kind of crater on the mountainside, and at the bottom the darkness seemed infinite. Lucy directed the light beam of the flashlight downward, but it was impossible to see the bottom. That's when a weak sound reached them. At first they thought it was just the wind through the trees, but then the sound became clearer, the beating of hooves against stone. "Are you hearing that?" whispered Joanna, grabbing Lucy's arm. The sound increased, becoming more rhythmic and defined. It was undoubtedly the sound of hooves, climbing the slope. The two nuns instinctively backed away, fearful of what they might see, and then, emerging from the darkness like an apparition, came Onyx. The black horse, covered in mud and with some superficial cuts, was carefully climbing up the slippery slope. And on his back, firmly gripping his mane, was Catherine. "My God!" exclaimed Lucy, dropping the flashlight from her trembling hands. "It's a miracle!" Catherine was conscious, although clearly exhausted and injured. Her habit was torn and dirty, but her eyes revealed a surprising lucidity. With one last effort, Onyx reached the top of the slope and stopped, his legs trembling from exhaustion. The nuns ran to help Catherine descend from the horse. It was then that they noticed something strange. She was firmly holding an object that shone faintly under the moonlight. It was a gold medallion, ancient and ornate. "Where did this come from?" asked Joanna, lightly touching the object. Catherine, unable to respond verbally, just closed her fingers more tightly around the medallion, as if fearing someone might take it from her. The three returned to the convent, where they were received with cries of surprise and joy. Mother Angela, seeing Catherine alive, fell to her knees, murmuring thanks. Onyx was taken to an improvised shelter, since the stable was partially destroyed. When they finally managed to settle Catherine in her bed and treat her wounds, which were miraculously not serious, Mother Angela noticed the medallion that she still held firmly. "Where did this come from?" the mother gestured, using sign language. Catherine hesitated, her eyes revealing a mixture of confusion and certainty. Slowly her hands formed the response. "I found it down there. There was a cave, and inside it." Her hands trembled so much that she couldn't complete the message. Instead, she opened the medallion, revealing inside a perfectly preserved miniature, the same photograph that Catherine had found in the attic hours before, showing Sister Clara next to the black horse called Shadow. The days that followed the miraculous rescue were of recovery and reflection at St. Mary's Monastery of Peace. Sister Catherine, after being examined by Dr. Robert Mitchell, a doctor who served the local community and who traveled to the convent as soon as the roads became passable, was diagnosed with only minor abrasions and exhaustion. Physically, she would recover without problems. However, something had changed in her gaze, a new intensity, almost feverish, that did not go unnoticed by the more observant sisters. Onyx was also recovering well. The veterinarian who examined him declared himself surprised by the animal's vitality, considering what he had faced. "This horse has unusual strength," he commented as he finished the examination. The medallion, however, became an object of great curiosity and unease. Mother Angela, after seeing the photograph inside it, decided that it was necessary to investigate more deeply the history of Sister Clara and the horse Shadow. To this end, she convened a meeting with the oldest nuns in the convent and assigned Sister Lucy to search the historical archives for any information about the monastery's past. "There is something in this story that has not been told to us," said the mother, seated in her oak chair in the austere office. "Something that seems to want to come to light after so many years." Sister Marianne, known for her skepticism, spoke with caution. "Mother, with all due respect, aren't we giving too much importance to a simple coincidence? Catherine found an old medallion during her fall. It's curious, yes, but not necessarily supernatural." Mother Angela observed her with serenity. "It's possible, Sister Marianne, but there are too many coincidences in this story. A deaf and wheelchair-bound nun who has an inexplicable connection with a black horse. Say a fall that should have been fatal, an impossible rescue, and now a medallion containing the image of another nun also in a wheelchair with her black horse from almost a century ago. If this doesn't deserve our attention, I don't know what would. While the meeting was happening, Catherine remained in her room, apparently sleeping. However, as soon as she was alone, she took from under her pillow the old diary she had found in the attic days before. She began to leaf through it again, this time with a more defined purpose. The diary had belonged to Sister Clara, and its entries dated from 1920 to 1924. The first pages related everyday life in the convent, but as Catherine advanced in reading, she discovered an increasingly intriguing story. Clara had come to the convent after an accident that left her paraplegic. Born to a wealthy family in New York, she found purpose in religious life after her condition removed her from the social life she had previously led. At the monastery, she developed a special connection with Shadow, a horse that, according to her own words, seemed to understand her soul in a way that no human had ever managed. What impressed Catherine most, however, were the accounts of dreams that Clara described, dreams where she rode freely through the mountains, exactly like the ones she herself had. In a particularly moving entry, Clara wrote, "Tonight, I dreamed again of freedom. Shadow and I were one being, galloping under the moonlight, without barriers or limitations. I woke up crying, not from sadness, but from a joy so deep that it overflows the limits of this broken body. I feel more and more that Shadow is not just an animal. There is something in his eyes, an ancestral wisdom, as if he keeps secrets that transcend our understanding." The subsequent entries described Clara's discovery about an ancient local legend, the story of a Native American warrior, Ayanna, who had lived in those mountains centuries before. According to the legend, Ayanna had a spiritual bond with a black Mustang that had saved her when, wounded in battle, she could no longer walk. The horse had taken her to a sacred cave where healing waters had returned her to life. In gratitude, Ayanna promised that her spirit would return whenever someone in those lands needed the same compassion that she had received. "Could it be possible," wrote Clara, "that Shadow is more than a simple horse, that he carries within him the spirit of that legendary Mustang? And am I somehow connected to this ancestral story? The dreams seem to want to tell me something, to guide me somewhere." The last entry in the diary, dated May 3, 1924, was brief and enigmatic. "Mother Josephine has forbidden me to continue investigating the legend of Ayanna. She says it is pagan superstition and that I am moving away from the true teachings of Christ. But tonight I had a different dream. I saw the cave of the sacred waters. I know where it is, and I feel that I must go there. Shadow knows the way. Tomorrow, when everyone is at high mass, I will depart. I feel that it is there that I will find the answers I seek." There were no more entries after that. Catherine closed the diary, her heart beating rapidly. Clara and Shadow had disappeared after that date, according to what she had learned from the convent's records. Had they found the cave? And was this the same cave where Catherine had ended up after her fall and where she had found the medallion? Her reflection was interrupted by a light knock on the door. It was Sister Lucy, bringing a tray with tea and cookies. "How do you feel?" she gestured, after setting the tray on the table beside the bed. "Better," Catherine replied with her hands, and then, unable to contain herself, she added, "I need to show you something." Lucy was the only one in the convent whom Catherine trusted completely. Younger than most of the sisters at only 29, Lucy was known for her open mind and the genuine respect she had for Catherine, whom she considered a friend, not just a colleague in vocation. Catherine handed her the diary, indicating that she should read the last pages. As Lucy read, her eyes widened in surprise. "This is extraordinary," she gestured when she finished. "Do you think the legend is real? That there really is a cave with healing waters?" "I think I found that cave when I fell," Catherine replied. "Onyx took me straight there, as if he knew exactly where it was. There was water, yes, emanating from the rocky walls, and it was there that I found the medallion on a kind of stone altar." Lucy sat on the edge of the bed, visibly impacted by the revelation. Mother Angela is calling a special meeting tomorrow, she informed. I found references in the archives to Sister Clara's disappearance. There are official documents, including a search report conducted by local authorities. They never found Clara or Shadow, but there is a curious testimony from a hunter who said he saw days later a woman in nun's clothing freely riding a black horse on the more distant mountains. Catherine felt a shiver run down her spine. Was the story repeating itself in some way? Or perhaps she thought it had never really ended. There's one more thing, continued Lucy, her fingers moving hesitantly. Mother Angela received a call from the Historical Institute. Apparently, someone discovered old correspondence from Mother Josephine, who directed the convent in Clara's time. In one of them, she mentions that Ayana's legend was not mere superstition, but a secret kept by the founding nuns of this monastery. The convent was purposefully built in this location because of the sacred cave. The meeting convened by Mother Angela took place in the convent's old library, a rarely used room that housed books and historical documents on dark wooden shelves that went from floor to ceiling. The air had a slight smell of mildew and old paper, but the open windows allowed the fresh morning breeze to circulate through the environment. All the nuns were present, seated in chairs arranged in a semicircle, with Catherine positioned close to the mother to facilitate communication by signs. What we have discovered in the last few days, began Mother Angela, her serene voice echoing in the respectful silence, goes beyond the official history of our monastery. What I am going to share now may challenge the understanding of some of you, but I ask that you listen with an open heart. She paused, looking each of the sisters in the eye before continuing. Lucy was simultaneously translating for Catherine, who was observing everything with absolute attention. St. Mary's Monastery of Peace was not built here by chance. The founding nuns, led by Mother Conception in 1880, chose this specific location because of a cave in the depths of the mountain. A cave that, according to ancient legends of the indigenous peoples, has waters with special properties. A murmur ran through the room. Sister Marianne raised her hand, asking permission to speak. Mother, forgive my frankness, but this sounds like superstition. How can we, as women of faith, give credit to pagan legends? Mother Angela nodded, understanding. Your concern is valid, Sister Marianne. However, what we are discussing here does not contradict our faith. On the contrary, it expands our understanding of divine mysteries. Mother Josephine's correspondence, which the Historical Institute sent us, describes how the founding nuns viewed the cave, not as a place of superstition, but as a natural sanctuary, where the divine presence manifested itself in a particular way. She picked up a worn leather folder and removed some yellowed sheets from it. In this letter, dated 1921, Mother Josephine writes to a colleague in another convent, "The cave beneath our monastery holds more than crystalline water. It holds stories of healing and redemption that predate our arrival in these lands. I see in it not a challenge to our faith, but a testimony of divine love that manifests itself in ways that our limited human understanding does not always grasp." Catherine carefully observed the mother's lips and Lucy's hands, which translated each word. Her heart was beating rapidly with each new revelation. The legend of Ayana, the Native American warrior who was healed in the waters of the cave after being saved by a black horse, was well known by our predecessors, continued the mother. In fact, there are reports of inexplicable cures that have occurred here over the years. And curiously, in many of these stories, the figure of a black horse appears. It was then that Catherine made a gesture, asking to intervene. Mother Angela nodded, and all attention turned to her. With agile hands, she began to signal, with Lucy translating aloud. Sister Clara's diary reveals that she knew this legend and believed that Shadow, her horse, had some connection with the Mustang from Ayana's story. In the last entry, she mentions that she intended to find the cave. It was exactly there that Onyx took me after my fall. The silence that followed was dense, loaded with unexpressed meanings. Finally, Sister Joanna, the oldest among them all, spoke with a trembling voice. "In my first year here in 1975, I heard a story about a nun who had disappeared in the mountains. The older sisters said she had found a path to freedom that transcended the physical body. I never really understood what they meant until now." Sister Marianne, still skeptical, crossed her arms. "All this is very interesting, but it still doesn't explain how Catherine survived the fall, or how a medallion from almost 100 years ago ended up in her hands," she argued, unable to fully accept what she was hearing. Mother Angela took a deep breath before responding. "There are things in this world, Sister Marianne, that transcend our rational understanding. Our faith is founded on miracles that defy scientific explanations. Why would it be so difficult to accept that something extraordinary might be happening here?" Catherine signaled again, her eyes shining with an unusual intensity. "I need to show you where the cave is. I can feel that Onyx will take us there. There is something that we all need to see." The proposal caused agitation. Some nuns showed enthusiasm, others apprehension. The prospect of an expedition in search of a legendary cave seemed to some a dangerous deviation from their religious obligations. After much discussion, Mother Angela made a decision. "Tomorrow, at dawn, a small group will go with Catherine to investigate this cave. I will go along with Sisters Lucy and Joanna. The others will remain here, dedicated to regular prayers." Sister Marianne, feeling challenged, rose from her chair. "With all due respect, Mother, I want to go too. If we are going to get involved with something so unusual, I prefer to witness it with my own eyes." The mother nodded, recognizing the importance of including a skeptical voice in the expedition. That night, while the others prepared to sleep, Catherine remained awake, looking out the window at the starry sky. The medallion rested in her open palm, reflecting the silvery glow of the moon. There was something hypnotic about the way the light danced on the ancient metal. Closing her eyes, Catherine allowed herself to relive the moment when she had been in the cave. After the fall, she had awakened in almost complete darkness, her body sore but surprisingly intact. Onyx was by her side, his warm breath close to her face. The horse had carefully carried her there, as if he knew exactly where they were. The cave was not completely dark. A strange bluish glow emanated from the damp walls, providing enough light for her to distinguish the shapes around her. In the center, there was a small natural pool of crystalline water, which seemed to pulse with a life of its own. And next, to the pool on a small altar of natural stone, was the medallion. Without knowing exactly why, Catherine had felt an irresistible compulsion to touch the water. When her fingers broke the surface, an indescribable sensation ran through her body, a comforting warmth, a vibrant energy that seemed to awaken every cell. It was at that moment that she had a vision. She saw Sister Clara, not as in the old photographs, but alive and radiant, riding freely on shadow through vast green fields. Clara had looked directly at her and smiled, as if sharing a precious secret. When the vision dissipated, Catherine found herself holding the medallion and instinctively knew that she needed to take it with her. Now, in the quietness of her room, she wondered what they would find the next day. Part of her feared that the cave might have disappeared, buried by the landslide. Another part, however, had absolute certainty that the place would be there, waiting for them, as it had been. Waiting for almost a century since Clara disappeared. A soft whinny interrupted her thoughts. From the window she could see the temporary stable where Onyx rested. The horse was restless, as if he too felt the proximity of something significant. "Tomorrow," thought Catherine, "tomorrow we will finally understand." The dawn brought a clear sky and air perfumed by the fresh dew on the vegetation. The 5 women met in the convent's courtyard, even before the sun had fully risen on the horizon. Sister Catherine was already in her wheelchair, adapted for more rugged terrain, a model that the convent had acquired especially for the equine therapy sessions with children. Onyx, saddled and prepared by Sister Lucy, waited patiently. His behavior was remarkably calm, almost solemn, as if he understood the importance of the journey they were about to undertake. "How exactly are we going to find this cave?" asked Sister Marianne, adjusting the backpack with supplies on her back. The landslide completely altered the topography of the slope. Catherine signaled, with Lucy translating, "Onyx knows the way. He will guide us." Marianne discreetly rolled her eyes but did not contest. The group departed with Mother Angela leading, followed by Catherine in her chair, who relied on Lucy's help to traverse the more difficult stretches of terrain. Sisters Joanna and Marianne came right behind, and Onyx walked beside Catherine like an attentive guardian. The descent down the damaged slope proved more challenging than they had anticipated. The landslide had created an unrecognizable landscape, with fallen trees, exposed rocks, and deep furrows where rainwater still flowed. For Catherine, each meter traversed brought back the vivid memory of the fall, but also a strange sensation of familiarity, as if she were following a path already known in another time. "We need to be careful," warned Mother Angela, halting before a particularly unstable stretch. "The terrain has not completely settled yet." It was at this moment that Onyx took the lead. The imposing black horse advanced a few steps, stopped, and looked back, as if he were calling the group to follow him. His behavior was so deliberate, so human in its intentionality, that even Sister Marianne seemed momentarily disconcerted. "He really seems to know where he's going," she murmured, reluctantly impressed. Following Onyx, the group circumvented the most dangerous area and continued descending by a more stable path. After about 40 minutes, they reached a small clearing where the vegetation grew in an unusual circular pattern, as if it were protecting something. Onyx stopped in the center of the clearing and whinnied softly. Catherine signaled quickly to Lucy. "It's here. The entrance to the cave is under these plants." With some hesitation, the nuns began to push aside the dense vegetation that covered the ground. Soon they discovered that, in fact, there was an opening, a narrow crevice but sufficiently wide to allow the passage of a person. The darkness that emanated from the hole seemed almost palpable. "How are we going to descend?" asked Sister Joanna, concerned. "And how will Catherine—" She didn't complete the sentence, embarrassed to mention the physical limitations of her colleague in front of her. Catherine, however, showed no offense. Instead, her eyes shone with an almost fierce determination as she signaled, "Onyx will take me. He did it before." Mother Angela studied the situation for a few moments before making a decision. "I'll go down first to check if it's safe. Lucy, you have the most powerful flashlight. Come with me. Joanna and Marianne, wait here with Catherine. If we don't return in 15 minutes, go back to the convent and seek help." The two nuns carefully descended through the opening, while the others waited in tense silence. Catherine kept one hand on Onyx's neck, her fingers intertwined in the black mane of the animal. There was a silent communication between them that transcended words or gestures. About 10 minutes later, Mother Angela's face reappeared in the opening. "You can come down," she called with an expression difficult to interpret. "It's extraordinary." One by one, the nuns descended. When it was Catherine's turn, Onyx approached the opening. Without hesitation, Catherine transferred herself from the chair to the animal's back, demonstrating a surprising ability for someone with her physical limitations. It was as if her body knew exactly what to do, guided by a muscle memory that transcended her own experience. With a graceful and controlled movement, Onyx descended through the opening, so careful with his precious cargo that he seemed to defy the laws of physics. A few moments later, Catherine joined the others inside the cave. The spectacle that awaited them left them all speechless. The cave was much larger than it appeared from outside. A vast natural hall opened before them, illuminated by a bluish glow that emanated from the rocky walls. The air was surprisingly fresh and tinged with a slight aroma of herbs. In the center, a natural pool of crystalline water reflected the light, creating hypnotic patterns on the ceiling of the cave. But what really captured the attention of all was the natural altar that rose beside the pool and what rested upon it. "It's not possible," whispered Sister Marianne, her voice trembling. On the altar, there was a nun's habit carefully folded, covered by a thin layer of dust. Beside it, an old book, inexplicably preserved from the humidity of the environment, and leaning against the wall behind the altar, a wooden wheelchair of the type used in the early 20th century. Mother Angela approached slowly and picked up the book. Upon opening it, she discovered that it was a diary, the continuation of Sister Clara's diary, whose last known entries dated from 1924. With trembling hands, the mother began to read aloud the first entry of this new volume. May 10th, 1924. I found what I was looking for. The cave really exists, and with it the truth about Shadow and about myself. The waters touched my broken body, and for a few blessed moments I felt what I never thought I would feel again, my feet touching the ground, my muscles responding to the command of my will. It was brief, but it was real. Shadow watched, patient, as if he knew what would happen, and then I understood. He always knew. The mother turned a few pages and continued. June 17th, 1924. I return to the cave whenever I can. Each visit brings more clarity. In the waters I see images, memories that are not mine but somehow also are. I see Ayana, the warrior, and her black Mustang. I see other women throughout the centuries, all connected by the same invisible thread that now binds me to this sacred place. I am beginning to understand that I am not discovering something new, but remembering something very ancient. The final entry, dated September 2nd, 1924, made the mother's voice falter momentarily. Today I made my decision. The world above would not understand me. It would call madness or heresy what I discovered here. But I know the truth. The waters not only heal the body, they free the soul. Shadow showed me that there are other paths, other ways of existing. This will be my last entry. When the waters call me completely, I will leave this diary and these clothes behind as testimony that I did not disappear. I only transformed. Perhaps one day, another soul like mine will find this place and understand what I discovered. Until then, I will ride free with Shadow, no longer limited by a body that does not respond, no longer silenced by a world that does not listen. The silence that followed was almost reverent. Catherine, who had understood everything through Lucy's sign translation, approached the pool. Without hesitation, she extended her hand and touched the surface of the water. The moment her fingers broke the crystalline surface, an extraordinary phenomenon occurred. The water seemed to take on a life of its own, emitting a more intense glow that spread up Catherine's arm and gradually enveloped her entire body. The nuns watched, petrified between fear and fascination. And then, before the incredulous eyes of all, Catherine rose from her wheelchair. For a fleeting moment, she stood completely erect, her face illuminated by a transcendental joy. Her lips moved, forming words that, although no one could hear, all understood. Now I understand. The moment passed as quickly as it had come. Catherine sat back down, but something had changed in her countenance, a deep peace, an unshakable certainty. Onyx approached her, gently touching her shoulder with his muzzle. Catherine looked at the horse, then at the sisters, and began to signal, with Lucy translating. Clara didn't disappear. She chose another path. The waters of this cave are not just healing, they are transformative. They reveal the true nature of the spirit, free from physical limitations. Clara and Shadow still ride through these mountains, but in a form that our common eyes cannot perceive. This is, began Sister Marianne, but couldn't finish. For the first time, her habitual expression of skepticism had been replaced by genuine astonishment. A miracle, completed Mother Angela, her voice calm, but not in the sense we usually attribute to the word. It is a mystery of creation that we are only beginning to glimpse. Catherine continued signaling. The medallion I found, it belonged to Ayana, the Native American warrior from the legend. It was passed on to Clara, and now to me. We are all part of the same cycle, the same uninterrupted flow of energy and purpose. The black horse, whether Shadow, Onyx, or the Mustang of legend, is the guardian of this knowledge, the guide who appears when one of us is ready to receive the truth. The nuns left the cave with more questions than answers, but also with a new understanding of the extraordinary that had touched their lives. In the months that followed, Catherine continued her work at the convent, but something had changed. Her communion with Onyx became even deeper, and they were often seen together at the top of the mountain, observing the horizon as if waiting for something or someone. St. Mary's Monastery of Peace acquired a new dimension in its mission. The cave was preserved as a sacred place, accessible only to nuns who demonstrated true spiritual openness to its mysteries. Mother Angela, with the wisdom of one who had witnessed the inexplicable, established a delicate balance between religious tradition and respect for the ancestral knowledge that the place represented. As for Sister Marianne, her transformation was perhaps the most surprising. The experience in the cave shook her certainties to their foundations, making room for a broader and more inclusive faith. It was she who, years later, documented the entire story in a manuscript that would be kept in the convent's archives, not as a secret to be hidden, but as a truth to be preserved for when the world was ready to understand it. On a full moon dawn, almost 3 years after the discovery of the cave, Sister Lucy was awakened by a powerful whinny that echoed through the mountains. Running to the window, she glimpsed a scene that would forever be engraved in her memory. Catherine on Onyx's back riding toward the top of the mountain. Not in her adapted chair, but mounted like an experienced rider, her body moving in perfect harmony with that of the animal. Lucy blinked, incredulous, and when her eyes opened again, the vision had disappeared. She ran to Catherine's room only to find it empty. On the perfectly made bed rested the gold medallion open, revealing no longer the old photograph but an empty space, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. The alarm was raised, and searches were organized throughout the region. But deep in their hearts, the nuns knew the truth. Catherine had not departed, she had transcended. The cycle had been completed, and now she rode free with Sister Clara, with Ayana, and with all the other souls who had found in the sacred waters the path to true freedom. Sometimes on stormy nights, when the wind howls through the Blue Ridge Mountains, local residents swear they hear the sound of hooves galloping on the slopes. They are the ethereal Amazons, they say with reverence, riding their black horses between this world and the other. And at St. Mary's Monastery of Peace, the nuns smile, keeping in their hearts the truth that transcends time, that true healing does not come from recovering what was lost, but from discovering what was always there, waiting to be revealed. 10. Years had passed since Sister Catherine and Onyx disappeared in the Blue Ridge Mountains. St. Mary's Monastery of Peace had subtly changed, not in its physical structure, which maintained the same century-old colonial architecture, but in the spirit that permeated its stone walls. Sister Lucy, now almost 40, had become the new person in charge of the equine therapy program. Under her direction, the project had expanded significantly, attracting people from all over the region and even from other states. Many said she possessed a special gift for connecting horses and patients, especially those with more complex needs. "It's not my gift," she always replied with a serene smile. "I just learned from the best." On that spring morning, while supervising a session with Michael, an 8-year-old autistic boy who had made remarkable progress in recent weeks, Lucy felt a familiar shiver run down her spine. It was that sensation she always had when she recalled the dawn when she had seen Catherine riding toward the mountains. "Are you all right, Sister Lucy?" asked Faith, the occupational therapist who worked with her. "Yes, just a memory," she replied, turning her attention back to the boy who was smiling on the horse. What Lucy had never shared with anyone, not even with Mother Angela before her, departure for eternal rest 3 years earlier, were the dreams. Vivid dreams where she found herself in the cave of the sacred waters, conversing with Catherine, Clara, and other women from different eras, all free, all complete, all radiating an inner light that transcended human understanding. After the session, when the sun was already beginning to set behind the mountains, Lucy headed to the small sanctuary they had built at the exact spot where Onyx had disappeared with Catherine. It was a simple space, a stone bench under a jasmine arbor, with a small plaque that read only, "For those who found true freedom." It was there that Sister Marianne found her, sitting in silent contemplation. "I knew you would be here," said Marianne, sitting beside her. "You always come on this day." Lucy smiled. It was true. Even after a decade, she had never failed to visit the sanctuary, on the anniversary of Catherine's disappearance. "Sometimes I wonder if I did enough," Lucy confessed. "If I could have understood earlier, helped more." Marianne, whose former skepticism had given way to a deep and open spirituality, gently placed her hand over Lucy's. "You know as well as I do that Catherine found exactly what she was looking for. It wasn't our role to prevent, only to witness." The silence that followed was comfortable, as it often is between people who have shared experiences that defy rational explanation. "We received an interesting letter today," commented Marianne finally. "From the National Historical Institute. They're cataloguing legends and myths of the region, and they found reports about the ethereal Amazons in documents dating from the colonial period." Lucy turned to her, interested. "What do the reports say?" "That since the most ancient times there have been stories of women who transcended their physical limitations through a special connection with black horses. The indigenous peoples considered them manifestations of the goddess Ayana in human form. The settlers later interpreted the sightings as mystical apparitions or witchcraft." Lucy nodded, pondering the information. "The most fascinating thing," continued Marianne, "is that they found similar records in different parts of the world, as if the phenomenon were not exclusive to these mountains, but part of a universal pattern that only occasionally reveals itself to those prepared to understand it." "It doesn't surprise me," Lucy responded softly. "Catherine used to say that the deepest truths are those that resurface in different cultures, in different eras, always with the same essence." A distant whinny interrupted the conversation. Both instinctively looked toward the top of the hill, where the setting sun created golden reflections in the clouds. "Did you hear that?" asked Marianne, standing up. Lucy nodded, her heart accelerating. It wasn't the first time they had heard mysterious whinnies at sunset, especially on this specific date. "It comes from the direction of the cave," she observed. For a moment, both considered the possibility of investigating, but as on other similar occasions, something held them back, not fear, but a deep respect for the mystery. Some doors, they had learned, should not be crossed until one was invited. As they returned to the convent, Lucy noticed something unusual in the stable. A mare they had recently rescued from mistreatment, and who until then had shown herself to be wary and distrustful of everyone, was unusually calm. Beside her, a girl in a wheelchair, Juliana, a new patient who had arrived only 2 days ago, stretched out her hand to touch the animal's muzzle. The scene made Lucy stop, a familiar sensation running through her body. The girl's posture, the gleam in her eyes, the way the mare responded to her touch. It was like seeing Catherine again so many years ago. "Marianne," she called softly. "Look." The nun observed the scene, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Do you think—" Lucy didn't respond immediately. She approached the girl slowly, trying not to disturb the moment of connection between her and the animal. "Hi, Juliana," she greeted softly. "I see that you and Star have already become friends." The girl smiled, a radiant smile that illuminated her face in a way that Lucy hadn't seen before. "She understands me," replied Juliana simply. "And I understand her. It's as if we already knew each other." Lucy felt a shiver run down her spine. "You know, Juliana, there's a special place here at the convent, a cave with very ancient waters. Someday, when you're ready, perhaps we can visit it together." The girl's eyes shone in a way that transcended her age. "The cave of the sacred waters," she said, as if speaking of a familiar place. "I dream about it." Lucy and Marianne exchanged surprised looks. Juliana could never have heard about the cave. Its existence was kept secret, shared only among the nuns who had witnessed Catherine's phenomenon. That night, after prayers, Lucy returned alone to the small sanctuary. The starry Virginia sky stretched above her like a mantle studded with diamonds. She took the medallion that Catherine had left from her pocket, the same one that, according to legend, had first belonged to Ayana, then to Clara, and that was now under her guardianship. For years the medallion had remained empty, its interior without the photograph it once contained. But that morning, upon opening it, Lucy had found something surprising, a new image, as if it had been impressed on the metal by an unknown force. It showed a woman in ancestral Native American attire, mounted on a black horse with mountains in the background that seemed strangely familiar. Now, in the starlight, she opened the medallion again and contemplated the image. She then understood what Catherine had tried to tell her in her dreams. The cycle continued, eternal as the mountains themselves. The knowledge was never lost. It only waited for the right moment to resurface, when a new heart was ready to receive. Until soon, Catherine, she whispered to the night. Your next Amazon has arrived. As if in response, a distant whinny echoed through the mountains, followed by the almost imperceptible sound of hooves galloping under the moonlight. And for a fleeting moment, Lucy could swear that she saw at the top of the most distant hill the silhouette of a magnificent black horse, with two women mounted on its back, one in nun's attire, the other in ancestral Native American garments. Then, the vision disappeared, leaving only the quiet certainty that some mysteries do not need to be explained to be true, and that true freedom, as Catherine had discovered, is not in transcending the limitations of the body, but in understanding that the soul was never really limited. The next morning, Juliana awoke abnormally early. When the nuns went to check on her, they found her already in her wheelchair, looking out the window toward the mountains, as if waiting for something, or someone. And beside her, on the bedside table, rested a small plant sprout that no one recognized, sprouting from a vase that had previously been empty. "What plant is that, Juliana?" asked Sister Marianne, intrigued. The girl smiled, a smile that seemed to contain the wisdom of many lives. "It's a gift from the cave," she replied simply. "It will grow when it's time." And so, in the ancient Blue Ridge Mountains, the cycle of the ethereal Amazons continued, linking past and future in an eternal dance of redemption and discovery. St. Mary's Monastery of Peace remained as the silent guardian of a knowledge that transcended creeds and eras, the truth that the deepest connection between all living beings can never really be broken, only momentarily forgotten. And somewhere, beyond the veil that separates worlds, Catherine and her sisters in spirit continued their infinite journey, free and complete, gently guiding those who would come after them along the same path of discovery and transcendence. Dear listeners, we thank you for accompanying us on this mystical journey through the Blue Ridge Mountains, discovering with us the secrets of the ethereal Amazons. If this narrative touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive more stories that explore the mysteries between heaven and earth. Leave your like and share with those who believe there is more in the world than we can see with our eyes. Tell us in the comments, have you ever felt an inexplicable connection with an animal or a place? Your experiences enrich our community and inspire us to seek new extraordinary stories to share with you.